This is a real event. Its true nature, however, has been catastrophically misunderstood for nearly a century. The world has been captivated by a fairy tale, a charming cryptozoological puzzle box, while the real horror, silent and abyssal, has been festering in the dark. The recent leak of the Acheron Project's final data logs has changed everything. The photographs are not of an animal. They are of an aperture, a wound in the world. And the things that have been seen writhing in its depths are not of this earth. Loch Ness is not a habitat, it is a doorway. The story, as the world knows it, began in earnest on May 2, 1933. The Inverness Courier published a sensational account from a local couple, Aldi and John Mackay, who claimed to have seen an enormous, whale-like creature rolling and plunging in the dark waters of the loch. The term monster was used, and a modern myth was born. Before this, the loch had its share of local folklore, tales of water horses or kelpies. But the Mackay sighting electrified the public imagination. The fuse was lit. Just a few months later, in July, George Spicer and his wife were driving along the newly constructed 82 road that skirted the loch's northern shore. They slammed on their brakes as a creature of indescribable appearance lumbered across the road in front of them. It was, Spicer would later report, like nothing he had ever seen. A long, undulating neck, a large body without limbs, carrying what looked like a slaughtered lamb in its mouth. It moved in a series of jerks, a grotesque spectacle of alien locomotion, before it slid into the concealing waters of the loch, leaving behind only the Spicer's terror and a legend that would span the globe. These early accounts set the template: the long neck, the humps, the immense size. The public, hungry for mystery in an increasingly demystified world, seized upon the most romantic explanation, a relic from a bygone age. A plesiosaur that had somehow survived extinction in the cold, deep, isolated waters of the Scottish Highlands. This theory provided a neat, if biologically improbable, solution. The iconography was cemented in 1934 with the publication of the surgeon's photograph. Taken by Colonel Robert Kenneth Wilson, it appeared to show the head and neck of a creature rising gracefully from the water. The image became the definitive depiction of Nessie, reproduced in books, magazines, and documentaries for 60 years. It was the monster's celebrity headshot. The decades that followed were a flurry of activity. Monster hunters flocked to the loch, armed with cameras, binoculars, and burgeoning hope. Sir Peter Scott, a renowned naturalist, led an expedition in the 1960s, giving the creature the playful scientific name Nociturus rhombotrix. In 1960, aeronautical engineer Tim Dinsdale captured a piece of film showing a dark, hump-like shape moving at speed across the surface of the loch, leaving a powerful wake. The footage was analyzed by the Royal Air Force's Photographic Interpretation Unit, which concluded the object was probably animate. The evidence, while tantalizing, was always fleeting, always ambiguous. Then came the turn of science, or at least, science-adjacent investigation. Dr. Robert Rhines, an American lawyer and inventor, led a series of expeditions in the 1970s using sonar and underwater photography. His team from the Academy of Applied Science produced some of the most compelling and controversial evidence to date. Sonar sweeps detected large, moving objects in the loch's depths. An underwater camera, triggered by the sonar, captured a handful of famously murky images. One appeared to show a large, diamond-shaped flipper. Another, dubbed the gargoyle head, seemed to depict a horned, bipedal-looking head, a far cry from the gentle plesiosaur. Skeptics dismissed the photos as cleverly interpreted sediment, air bubbles, or even a sunken prop. But for believers, it was proof. Something large and something unknown was down there. The largest scientific survey of the loch, Operation Deep Scan, took place in 1987. A fleet of 24 boats, equipped with sonar, formed a massive, sweeping acoustic curtain across the entire width of the loch. Over the course of a weekend, they registered 3 significant, unexplained sonar contacts. One, in the deep water of Acheron Castle, was described by the project leader as being larger than a shark but smaller than a whale. The object was tracked moving at depth before the contact was lost. The official conclusion was cautious but clear. The sonar contacts were genuine. They were not inanimate objects, and they could not be explained by any known phenomenon or animal in the loch. This cycle of evidence and ambiguity continued for decades. The surgeon's photograph was eventually exposed in 1994 as an elaborate hoax, a toy submarine fitted with a sculpted head. The confession of one of the conspirators, Christian Sporling, was a body blow to the romantic image of the monster. Yet, it did not kill the mystery. The Dinsdale film remained unexplained. The Rhine's photos, though murky, were never definitively debunked. The Operation Deep Scan sonar contacts were a matter of official record. And the eyewitness sightings, thousands of them, continued. People kept seeing things they simply could not explain. Scientific explanations were proposed, attempting to ground the phenomenon in reality. The most popular was the giant eel theory. The loch is known to have a large eel population, and it was posited that a mutation or simply an unusually large specimen could account for the sightings of long, undulating shapes. Another theory suggested a Greenland shark, a species known to grow to immense sizes and tolerate cold, low salinity water, might have found its way into the loch. Sturgeon, large, primitive-looking fish, were also offered as a candidate. Psychological explanations abounded as well. Misidentification of known objects like floating logs, boat wakes, or swimming deer, combined with wishful thinking and pareidolia. The human tendency to see patterns in randomness. A 2018 comprehensive DNA survey of the loch's water, conducted by Professor Neil Gemmell of the University of Otago, found no evidence of plesiosaur, shark, or sturgeon DNA. What it did find, however, was a significant amount of eel DNA at every sampling location. Gemmell concluded that if there was a monster, the giant eel theory was the most plausible. And there the mystery rested, a comfortable stalemate between folklore and skeptical science. Nessie was either a giant eel, a psychological quirk, or a stubbornly elusive creature. But all of these theories shared a common, fundamental assumption, that they were looking for an animal, a creature of flesh and blood, living and breathing within the confines of the loch. This assumption was, as we now know, entirely and horrifyingly wrong. The truth is infinitely more complex and infinitely more terrifying. Enter the Acheron Project. It was not a monster hunting expedition. It was a clandestine joint effort between a private geophysics firm, known for its work in deep earth resource scanning, and an obscure branch of the Ministry of Defense concerned with theoretical physics and spatial anomalies. Their official cover story was a high-resolution geological survey of the Great Glen Fault, the massive tectonic rift in which Loch Ness sits. Their true purpose was far more esoteric. For years, intermittent and anomalous energy readings had been detected originating from the loch's deepest point, a 788-foot chasm known as the Acheron Deep. These were not magnetic or seismic fluctuations. They were something else, something that defied easy classification. Brief bursts of what one internal memo described as non-Euclidean gravitational flux. The project, led by Dr. Iris Thorne, a brilliant but controversial physicist, deployed technology far beyond anything used on the Loch before. They did not use simple sonar. They used a proprietary system called chromatin resonance imaging, or CRI. In layman's terms, CRI bombards an area with tachyonic particles, which are theoretically capable of moving backward in time on a quantum level. The resulting echoes do not just map physical space, but also subtle disruptions in the temporal fabric. The technology was experimental, designed to detect microsingularities or tears in spacetime. Thorne had a wild hypothesis that the immense pressure and unique geological properties of the Great Glen Fault, combined with the massive body of water acting as a lens, could be creating a stable, naturally occurring Einstein-Rosen bridge, a wormhole, a doorway. For the first 3 weeks, the results were unremarkable. The CRI mapped the loch bed with unprecedented detail, revealing the scars and fissures of its glacial birth. Then, on the 22nd day of the survey, the anomaly appeared. It was located in the Acheron Deep, at a depth of approximately 750 feet. It was not an object. The system registered it as a perfect sphere of absolute null space, roughly 30 meters in diameter. It did not reflect the chromatin particles. It did not absorb them. They simply ceased to exist upon contact with its perimeter. Sonar waves directed at the sphere vanished without an echo. A submersible thermal probe sent to investigate registered an instantaneous temperature drop of over 20 degrees Celsius as it approached the sphere's edge, a violation of thermodynamics in the stable deep water environment. The water itself was not colder. The energy was simply being siphoned out of the instruments. The sphere was a void, a patch of nothingness, stitched into the fabric of reality at the bottom of the loch. Thorne was ecstatic. His team was terrified. They watched their screens as the CRI struggled to interpret the phenomenon. The system tried to render the sphere, but the data was paradoxical. It was a three-dimensional object that possessed properties of a higher-dimensional space, folding in on itself. The logs from this period are filled with the team's frantic attempts to describe what they were seeing. "It's not a hole in the water," one technician wrote. "It's a hole in the world." It was then that Thorne made the connection. He cross-referenced the precise coordinates of the anomaly with the historical records of major sightings. The 1972 run sonar contact, the 1987 Operation Deep Scan event. Dozens of the most credible, multi-witness sightings of humps or necks breaking the surface. They all occurred when the witnesses were in a direct line of sight, or within a narrow cone of proximity to the location of the sphere deep below. The hypothesis became chillingly clear. People were not seeing a single creature swimming the length of the loch. They were seeing brief, localized extrusions from the anomaly. The long neck was not the neck of a plesiosaur. It was a tendril, a probe, extending from the doorway for a few moments before retracting. The humps were not the back of a great beast. They were brief, partial materializations, knuckles of some vast, unseen hand pressing against the veil of our reality. This explained the fleeting nature of the sightings. It explained the bizarre descriptions, like spicers, of a creature that moved with an unnatural, jerky motion. It was not swimming, it was being projected. It also explained the lack of any biological footprint. No carcasses, no bones, no consistent DNA. The things that came through did not belong here. They did not die here, they returned to whence they came. The Rhine's gargoyle head photo was re-examined. It was not a head, it was a momentary glimpse of something with angles and features that are minds. Desperate for familiarity, tried to shoehorn into the shape of a face. The Acheron Project shifted its focus from detection to observation. They deployed a series of high-resolution, deep-sea holographic cameras around the anomaly. 4 days, nothing happened. The void remained inert, a silent, black sphere in the crushing dark. And then, it began to stir. The change was subtle at first. The CRI registered a spike in gravitational flux. The water around the sphere began to shimmer. Not from any current, but as if the space itself were vibrating. Then, from the center of the blackness, something began to emerge. This is the point where the Acheron data logs shift from scientific observation to raw, unadulterated horror. The leaked files include a series of time-stamped holographic captures. These are the new photos. They are not like the surgeon's fuzzy, black and white deception. They are terrifyingly clear. The first image shows a shape that is geometrically impossible. It is a lattice of thin, dark limbs, like obsidian glass, intersecting at angles that should not exist in three-dimensional space. It has no discernible front or back, no head, no body. It is pure structure, and it moves by folding and unfolding itself, contracting and expanding like a lung made of knives. It existed partially outside the sphere for exactly 7 seconds before retracting. A second emergence, 12 hours later, was biological, but in a way that defied all terrestrial biology. It resembled a colossal, translucent membrane, like the bell of a jellyfish. But it was filled not with water, but with a swirling constellation of faint, internal lights. From its edges trailed dozens of filaments, each ending in a complex, crystalline structure that pulsed with a cold, blue luminescence. The entity did not swim. It appeared to pull itself through the water by contracting the space in front of it. The third and most disturbing set of images came 2 days later. What emerged was not one entity, but many. They were small, vaguely humanoid in silhouette, but their limbs were too long, with too many joints. Their movements, captured in a frantic series of frames, were spidery and impossibly fast. They had no discernible features, just smooth, pale surfaces where a face should be. They swarmed out of the void, a silent, frantic cloud of wrongness, exploring the perimeter of their exit with twitching, unnatural curiosity. They seemed to be testing the boundary, pushing against the water, the pressure, the very physics of our world. They remained for nearly a minute before being drawn back into the sphere as if on a string. Digger Thorne and his team had their answer. Loch Ness was not home to a monster, it was a waiting room. The things inside were not of our dimension, not of our reality, they were something other. The local folklore took on a terrifying new context. The kelpies, the water horses that were said to lure people to their deaths. Were they misremembered encounters with these fleeting, horrifying apparitions? The disappearances that have occurred around the loch over the centuries, often dismissed as hiking accidents or suicides. How many were victims of these brief, predatory incursions? The Acheron team found correlations in old police reports. hikers vanishing from paths near the water's edge, boats found adrift and empty, all in areas directly above the anomaly. The project should have ended there. The discovery was made, the danger was unimaginable. Any rational protocol would have dictated immediate withdrawal and a containment plan of the highest secrecy. But Dieter Thorne was not just a scientist, he was an obsessive. He believed he was on the cusp of the greatest discovery in human history. He had to know what was on the other side of the doorway. Against the strenuous objections of his team, he authorized the final phase of the project, a focused energy probe. The plan was to fire a concentrated beam of quantum particles directly into the center of the void, hoping the feedback would generate a map of the space within. It was an act of supreme arrogance. It was like shouting into the ear of a sleeping god. The final data log is a fragmented audio file and a corrupted stream of sensor readings. The audio begins with Thorne's voice, calm and clinical, counting down to the probe's activation. Probe activation in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, mark. For a moment, there is silence. Then, the sound of the CRI system emitting a high-pitched, warbling alarm. A technician's voice, panicked, "Sir, the resonance is off the charts." It's not just echoing, it's feeding back. The sphere is expanding. The sensor data confirms it. The null-space sphere, 4 weeks a stable 30 meters, doubled in diameter in less than a second. Thorne's voice, now strained, "Hold your positions, log the energy curve, this is it." Another voice screams. It is not a scream of fear, but of agony. The audio becomes a cacophony of alarms and shouting. It's in the lab, oh God, how is it in the lab? This part is incoherent. The CRI was on a surface vessel, miles from the submersible canvas. The statement makes no logical sense. The system logs show every camera feed going dead simultaneously. The thermal sensors flatline. The last intelligible sound on the audio log is not human. It is a wet, resonant clicking, a sound like a billion insects chewing in unison. And it is coming from inside the control room. The final, garbled transmission from Eris Thorne is just 3 words. It's not a door, the rest is static. The official report states that the Acheron Project ended in tragedy. A catastrophic equipment malfunction led to an explosion on the research vessel, which sank in the deepest part of the loch with the loss of all 5 crew members. The depth and treacherous conditions, the report concludes, make any recovery effort impossible. The data is considered lost forever. But the data was not lost. A junior technician, a whistleblower who had been downloading the project logs to a secure server off-site, fearing exactly such a cover-up, leaked the files 3 months ago. They have been dismissed by the mainstream media as an elaborate, high-tech hoax. Another chapter in the long history of Nazi-related fraud. But for those who have seen the full dataset, the holographic captures, the final audio log, there is no doubt. The mystery of Loch Ness is not what is in the water. The mystery is what the water is holding back. Thorne was wrong to call it a doorway. A doorway implies something passive, a simple entry and exit. His final, panic words suggest he realized his mistake too late. This is not a passive gateway. It is an encroachment, an invasion in slow motion. The energy probe did not just map the anomaly, it stimulated it, it woke it up. And the most chilling part is not in the leaked files. It is in a quiet, ongoing report from the Scottish Environmental Protection Agency. which maintains a series of unmanned sonar buoys to monitor water quality. In the last 2 months, 3 of these buoys have gone silent. The first to fail was the one anchored deepest in the Acheron Deep. The second was a mile north of that position. The third, just last week, was even closer to the shore. Each time, the final transmission was the same: a sudden, inexplicable sonar shadow, and then nothing. Something is moving. The void is no longer stable. The silence is spreading. The things that once made only fleeting, momentary appearances are learning to stay longer. And they are getting closer.